Welcome to a podcast called The Banker and the Broker. You know, this came about because Mackie Hughes and I, Dan Owens, talk often about the state of the industry in the senior housing business. So this podcast is going to cover some of the things that we're seeing in the industry. We're going to talk about trends, and we're going to talk about outlook, and then also what we do to get a deal done in the senior housing industry. Let's talk a minute about what we're seeing in the industry, Mackie. We're talking about, I think the big elephant in the room, I call it the pig in the python, is the demographics of the industry. And this year, 2025, this is the first year when the baby boomers, 76.4 million, are turning 80. And so they're coming through. When I say pig in the python, that's sort of a crude analogy, but it's this big bulge that's coming through the snake that's coming up, and that's our future market. Mackie, you're seeing that as well, the demographic trends?
It's staggering. I mean, you know, you can look at many different metrics, but the demand is there and is growing. You know, we will see in some of the things we looked up and have been told 10,000 people turning 80 every day. You look at sort of from late 70s to early 80s when people move into assisted living, and even more so independent living before that. It's just there. You've got the quote-unquote silver tsunami. You've got you know, a shortage in inventory, really, which we'll get into later. And you know, it's a really great time to be able to be involved in the industry and be on that growth end. You know, with lending, with selling, and expanding. We do ground-up construction, all that. So we anticipate to be quite busy, as a lot of people in the industry do, in the next 5 to 10, almost out to 25 years. Like, we do 25-year loans. A lot of the time, there's no balloons on these things. So, if you look at sort of the last NIC map that was published in Q1 this year, they're anticipating stuff to keep growing, and even at 2050, even if we close the loan today and they paid out, they're still going to have that huge demand, that huge population growth, right? So that's the positive I think we see, and that's why there's so much talk, and there's people like Dan and I that all we do every day is senior housing, because there's such a need, and so glad to be a part of that. I think trends are trends, right? There's been some headwinds to that. This is not the easiest industry to underwrite to. We consider it an operating business that just so happens to have real estate, right, Dan? So, managing expenses, managing marketing, managing your employees, regulators, as you said earlier, and payer sources is a huge factor, and a lot of thought and analysis goes into all that, aside from just the real estate value. If you were to underwrite like a simple multifamily deal.
Sure.
So knowing all that, I know, Dan, I think we're going to get in a little bit in the weeds on some of the trends and sort of the headwinds, if you will, in what you're seeing and what I'm seeing.
Sure. Well, the other interesting factor in the industry, and I don't know whether you can classify, in some ways you can classify it as a headwind and some as a tailwind, and that is the lack of development of senior housing communities in the last few years. I think this year is the lowest number of starts of new construction in senior housing in at least 8 to 10 years. I think there's 2,500 total around the country housing starts, which what that does is multifold. Number one, there is a demand out there with 10,000 people, they call it the silver tsunami, turning 80 every year, demanding nicer and nicer properties, or demanding a space, period. And then there's this dearth of properties that are out there. So that means absorption. That means the the occupancy of the existing units has gone up. We call it the buyer-seller bid-ask, and that has narrowed, obviously. But it's also put pressure on new construction, and it looks like the demand is going to go for years and years, Mackie.
Yeah, I mean, so we had come out of COVID, right? So there was definitely a push for new construction, new growth, or turnarounds, or whatever. Inventory was going up, but then no one could go in because it was COVID. So a lot of stuff was still being built. You had plenty of space, but as things started to open up again, these started filling up, right? So then you're getting to a point where, all right, well, it's absorbed, right? We've got everyone in these buildings. They took a little bit longer to lease up than we thought because of COVID, but now we're just getting back to that pre-COVID ratio in through Q1 of 2025, where, all right, well, what are we gonna do next, right? And whether that's the empty building that you could go and upfit and fill that up, those are going to be fewer and far between, I think, as the demand rises, or at the end of the day, it's going to be ground up construction, and so catching up to that demand, I think, in the coming years is going to be a challenge, but also a good thing in the sense of, if we build it, it'll fill up.
Right. Well, the capital needs are going to be enormous in the senior housing industry for the new construction that is demanded, and maybe we're lagging a little bit, mainly because of the other headwind, which is interest rates.
Sure.
And between interest rates and inflation, that's put pressure on the debt service coverage ratio for sellers. They've had to meet multiples of net operating income to be able to get a deal done. So the higher the interest rates, even though historically we're not out of the range of where 4.5 treasuries, we're not out of the historical norm, but certainly we're much higher than 1.5 we had in 2022. So interest rates, inflation, and then the third leg is employment.
The idea that rates have affected growth and people jumping into the market is very true. Not just interest rates, but leverage, right? Leverage has been, went from being very high to being not competitive at all on a balance sheet or a conventional loan, right? It's not going to look good for owner-operators and stuff. There are other products which we'll get into later that help with that. But as far as the rate environment, yes, we're still fighting inflation. We're still waiting for that to come down. It is still a buyer's market, right? As you would imagine, you're selling the buildings. But that's becoming a little bit easier for the sellers, right? We see the light at the end of the tunnel for the sellers. And then hopefully for buyers and sellers, those rates continue to correct. But I don't think it's ever going to get to where it was. And I think people have realized that. They've accepted that. There's more discussion. There's more interest. And I know you've seen it and I've seen it. People are kind of like, okay, here's the new reality. Let's continue to do what we can. We know there's going to be demands. Let's work around it. So that would be the first 2 points. The third point is your biggest expense, right? And that has been an issue that COVID brought, and it continues to be the main stressor, I think, for an operator. After they're in the building, they're doing everything. So caregivers, right? Caregivers are going to be very unique people. You have to have a very caring person. You have to have somebody that's willing to do the right thing, that's not going to leave for a higher paycheck in a different industry. And so we saw during COVID that you could be paid more at working at a fast food restaurant than you could at working at a senior care facility. And in a way, that's good, right? You're kind of getting those people where they probably should have been payroll-wise, but you have to manage that. And so how do you manage that, right? We see, year over year from ASHA, from Nick, that revenue's up 9%, but payroll is up 14%, right? So the revenue has to catch up with that payroll expense, and it's doing that, right? It's leveling out, inflation's coming down. But the real good operators, the ones we want to deal with, the borrowers we want to deal with, have managed around that. Incentives, things like, just little things outside of the actual, payroll expense to keep people. Those are the ones that have been successful, and we've had a great portfolio, and we manage to that. We go see every deal. We meet with the owners, the caregivers, and we make sure that it's a place where they want to work and a place they want to stay. So there's a difference there. You can't be hands off, whether or not you have a third-party management company or not. But taking care of the caregiver is probably one of the more important aspects of how we look at it. And Len, and I know you see that too, Dan.
Well, I do, and I think that maybe you hit on there seems to be a division in this industry. The industry is hospitality meets healthcare. And you have some people wanting to get into the business that have a hospitality background but no healthcare background.
Sure.
Or you have people that have healthcare backgrounds but no hospitality background. So you basically have to provide food, shelter, security, activities, and that sort of thing. But also you have to manage the whole medication management, the whole care component. And that's the dividing line because it's such a people business. We see it every day where operators maybe are failing in their business. Someone buys it and can turn it around in 4 or 5 months, 6 months, and it's a whole different business. The business, as we go into lending, it is and I'm a former appraiser, but it is a bottom line business. It is when you go and appraise a business, you're primarily looking at the income capitalization method in valuing a business, not the comparative cost generally or the replacement value. So the income cap, it really tells a true story of how well you're actually managing the business. Because it's a people business, if you're not able and you're not skilled at managing the state with its regulatory demands and the families and the residents and also the employees and managing all of that successfully, you're going to take a hit on your final margin,
Yep.
on your EBITDA margin, which will affect your price and anybody's ability to buy your property. Is that?
That's exactly right. It's again, as I said, we look at it as an operating business that just so happens to have real estate. And that doesn't, the real estate component is important. I think that, that allows for some competitive leverage and products that you can utilize to finance and grow. But yeah, we're gonna dive into that. A debt service coverage analysis. Obviously cap rates are different in every market. We are at Live Oak Bank not scared to go to a tertiary market, not scared of middle market or anything like that. We're not scared of turnarounds. But we mitigate those risks through structure. So the best thing is, if you're looking at a deal, being realistic on if it's a projection-based deal, aka pro forma-based deals, being realistic of your margins, talking to Dan, talking to me, figuring out what makes sense for you, and then seeing if we can structure and get a deal done, right? There are a lot of people that come in and have expertise, like you said, whether it's hospitality or healthcare. But we're here to help as resources to get the financing in sort of the right facility for the right buyer.
All right. Well, I want to talk about, we are doing deals, and I want to talk about for just a moment velocity. I mean, I've done 11 deals in 2025 to date and have potentially 6 more closings this year. So we're getting a lot of activity in selling. Now, one thing I would tell someone that was looking to sell their property, I get these calls. They say, I would like to kind of know what my facility or multiple facilities are worth. We try to underwrite. We try to give them an idea of them. And they say, well, I don't know if I want to sell now because things are going great. The cash flow is great. I may just hang on to them for a while. And then you get a call from somebody that says, well, my business was doing well 3 years ago. But now, because of illness or fights with partners or fights with families or whatever, now we're just breaking even or even losing money. So now I want to sell. And in my brain, that's about the opposite way of looking at it.
Yeah.
You want to sell when things are going well, right? Right, Mackie?
Right. Yeah. And look, we know things happen. There are certain ways around it, but it's very difficult to lend, especially if it's a straight acquisition, to a deal that does not cash flow. You know, they say, hey, well, it worked 2 years ago and it doesn't work today because, whatever excuse it is, and I'm sure there are legitimate excuses, but at the end of the day, you know, we're not going to lend 90% of a deal unless we feel really good about where that deal is today, where it's going. And again, there are instances where seller notes come into play that says, hey, look, we had a little bit of we had some attrition this year. Maybe we did some CapEx or whatever it was. Maybe the roof, there was a storm. We can work around some stuff, but operational expertise and operational success is got to be the number one factor or constant, right? If we know things happen, we can work through it. And then also you're transitioning a business, right? So the new buyer has to have, a really good business plan, really good background that may or may not be in healthcare. It's always helpful that if it is, and there's a thing that I've noticed and I try to look for throughout deals is having not just the healthcare background, but also having the business acumen. Right, you need somebody where
Absolutely.
They're going to market the visit, they're going to go out and source residents, they're going to have a wait list, they're going to hire the right people, and be involved in that inside of it. Right, you could be the best, elder care doctor in the world, but if you don't go and market your business and drive residents to your facility, well, that's not going to be successful. And we've seen that time over time. Our deals have always done pretty well, but we're getting in front of that. Doing these owner-operator type of deals, we want that. We want components of that, and we want to see that in the business plan. So, both things are important: caring for the resident, but also, making sure that you're developing your business.
Well, and that's absolutely true. And the latent risk is the regulatory risk. I don't want to dwell on the regulatory risk because it's not fun. But this is the only business that I can think of, that I know of, whether it's a nursing home or it's a assisted living or any of these homes. They're regulated by the state. And it's the only business I know where you could be making an NOI of $50,000 a month and start getting lazy and start not managing your property and have things go wrong in your facility, and the state can come in and basically either suspend your operations or in the worst case scenario, just shut you down.
Right.
So this is not a hotel, right? It's not like any other, it's like very few businesses that I know of where it can be so lucrative. Margins can be between 30 and 40%. If they're run right, you can make a lot of money in the industry, but also the state wields incredible power to basically just close you down. So if you cannot manage census risk, interest rate risk, operational risk, and also regulatory risk, you're not going to be successful.
Number one, licensure, keeping everything open, having a good relationship with the regulators always is great, right? Being ready for that, prepared for that. And then also, understanding that if you check that box, you did very correctly, you're really right, Dan. I know industry norms around 30% of the margins, but again, I've seen them get up to 40. And when you're at 40 and you're doing well and nothing's on your back, I mean, that's a really great business to be in, and it's a great industry to be in. And all in all, that's why we're sitting here, right?
That's right.
It's a great industry. You're doing great things for the community, and we know that demand is there, right? But again, just because there's demand there, it's not like hospitality, right? You have to be clean on all that stuff we just touched on, and as long as that happens, you could be sitting pretty as a buyer.
I want to talk just a minute about a phenomenon that you have in North Carolina that you do not have in Georgia, South Carolina, and Virginia, and that is a certificate of need. And I am active, or have been an active seller of certificate of needs for adult care homes, which is assisted living, around the state. So there is a barrier to entry in North Carolina that you don't have in other states.
Sure. It's a huge benefit to a lender to have that barrier of entry, right? No one can build a brand new thing right across the street and take away potential customers, right? And that's why we get pretty aggressive in the state of North Carolina, and that's why you and I work so frequently together. And obviously there's CON for skilled nursing in all the other states, but there are only a few states that require that for assisted living memory care. And so when you look at that, there are two factors that play in there, right? You're going to get more private pay clients. So you're not going to have to manage as much of the Medicaid reimbursement and have staff do all that. In the state of North Carolina, it's not too bad. It's very regular, but you still have to address that, right? There's still going to be more regulation to bill and all that fun stuff. Whereas other states, you're going to see more of a mix of public source payers as opposed to private. And so that kind of lends itself to, hey, okay, there are only so many beds in each county. We know we're going to be full, and we know that we can leverage that with a lender and say maybe you have an older facility, but that facility is still going to make money. We see that time and time again throughout the state. Now, that being said, you're going to be doing so well in that older facility that gives you maybe a chance to look at maybe doing another newer build or expanding upon that facility into a new wing that you could charge a little bit more. So it's a great thing for the seller, for the buyers to step into something where they know they're going to be making money. The demand's going to be there if they do everything right, and then being able to know that they can have an extra amount of time to expand without worrying about competition.
Right, right. Well, I traveled the state. You mentioned rural, tertiary areas. I travel, Mackie, as you know, I go all over, certainly all over the Carolinas and in the past, Georgia, Alabama, other states as well, to very small towns. There's multiple facilities in every town. There's always a variety of there's a strata. There's the Medicaid buildings for people who cannot afford private pay. There's those facilities. And then there's middle market assisted living that are moderate cost, and then there are the high-end properties. So we do a little bit of everything. Yep. And typically in the last few years, you have people that grew up in the industry, maybe their parents were in the industry, and now they're getting they're baby boomers and they're getting older. And so I get these calls that say, look, we've been doing this for 30, 40 years. My family's been doing it. We're ready to sell. So, that a lot of times starts the process. We did do a portfolio deal, so it's not that we don't do portfolio properties where it's a bigger company that owns multiple buildings, but on the individual, I call it the mom and pop basis, we do get a lot of those calls. So I wanted to walk through, if it's okay, sure, just how that process works when someone calls and says, I'm considering selling my property. I've been doing it for X number of years, both on how we treat the seller and how we treat the buyer. And then when I give you a call, then you can go from there. But when I get those calls, first of all, there's a lot of factors that go into what I think the person can, the organization can get for the property. Sure. So you have to go and inspect the property. You have to look at the books, at least the last 3 years, tax returns, the most recent year's performance. Where are you with that? And then generally, I look at it with an appraiser's eye, and I'll be the first one to do this, not the last, but look at it with an appraiser's eye, try to underwrite the property and say, I believe here's the price range that you can get for the property. Generally, I ask for at least 9 months to a year, although it generally does not take that long, but I just want to have enough time to get a property sold. So when you go to the market, you really have to have a professional package, and that photography, you have to have the presentation proper. Yep. And then you put it out there. One of the keys is the confidentiality of the property, because it's not great for employees or for the residents to know that a property is for sale. That just is so disruptive to the operation. Sure. So getting that confidentiality agreement with every person that I talk to before they even know it's for sale is crucial. the confidentiality. I really don't even send the confidentiality agreement until I've vetted the buyer, and so the buyer needs to be able to show me that they're able to operate the building and they have the actual the wherewithal to buy it.
Sure.
So then the next step is to call Mackie. Mackie, how does it work?
Okay, so starting from where you started, yeah, we do all types of loans, all types of class, all the high end stuff, all the way down to low end stuff. But predominantly, owner occupier, mom and pop sort of facilities where I focus. Hey, Dan's calling me or has somebody, hey, that needs some financing or an option of financing. Say, okay, well, what does the LOI say? A lot of times what'll happen is, and you know this, they'll call me and say, what's it really worth? And I get that question more than you would ever think. And what I cannot give a value as a banker, right? So what I end up doing is saying, hey, this is what we would lend to it based off of, the package, based off of whatever. And Dan, you're always pretty spot on. But sometimes things come out. We run cash flow is the first thing we do. Look at what they're selling it for, even if it's just an LOI or an idea. We'll get involved before there's an LOI, but we really want to see that there's some negotiation. We don't want to spin our wheels. So we look at the last 3 years of tax returns, the year-to-date P&L balance sheet. We look at payer sources, and if you're doing Medicaid, in this state it's 14 days you're getting paid, but we'll get an agings report. So we'll look at all those things. We'll look at the pretty pictures and all that stuff, and kind of put together a basic structure, right? I don't want people to have to fill out a ton of forms right up front. We can kind of say, hey, there's the deal here. Okay, now fill out our forms. And we look at not just the property performance, though. We do go in and look at the buyer's profile. That means their personal tax returns, personal financial statement. If they have other businesses, which we call affiliated businesses, we'll look at that performance and look at a debt schedule, right? So we're doing basically a global cash flow analysis, just making sure, hey, we're not putting people in a bad situation. And also saying, hey, this is where we can come in. Maybe there's room to talk about seller financing. Maybe not. That's all going to be between the buyer and seller. But yeah, we're going to give you that term sheet. We're going to say, hey, here's all your fees. Here's all your closing costs. Here's your rate. Here's your term. Take this, consider it, and we'd love to earn your business, right? So we do that. I'd say 7 or 8 times a day on deals throughout the whole country, but that's the initial look, right? So we get that. Hey, okay, this looks good. We're going to move forward. Dan's happy. We're in underwriting, and so generally to get a term sheet, it's probably 2 days, a day to 2 days. Then we'll go to underwriting. That takes about 2 to 2.5 weeks, and then from there, the bank approves the deal, right? And that's a binding commitment to fund the loan from Live Oak Bank, right? So everyone's happy. We're setting a closing date, right? So closing date's usually 5 to 7 weeks, but it's going to be a 90-day process on average for us.
Right. Well, I think what's interesting from time to time, of course, I've been in it for 30 years. I've seen a little bit of everything. You've seen so much. I'll hear about someone who's, in fact, this happened recently, where someone sold their property, sold their facility to someone that just called them on the phone and said, I'd like to buy. And when I analyzed the deal, they had left about $1 million on the table.
Yeah.
I was just stunned.
Sure.
But they saved the headache of dealing with an advisor. I guess that was, in their mind, that was what they wanted to do. Maybe it was easy, but when you see that kind of generational wealth being left on the table, and you have out-of-state people calling some of these properties and saying, "Oh, I'll just give you this," I think I feel sad for the sellers when they fall for that.
Yeah, it is a unique market, senior housing, right? There's way more involved with it than multifamily or hospitality even, and so. You have some unsophisticated sellers and you have some unsophisticated buyers. And our job is to help those those people that are really good at running facilities and really good at bringing residents in, but maybe they've done 2 bank deals their whole life, or they've done 2 transactions. To leave $1 million on the table is that's an extreme case, but
Extreme case.
It does matter. I mean, Dan, you've been in this industry and valued stuff and sold however many buildings ever, how many years, and you're very involved in the associations in the state of North Carolina and South Carolina. And so when you've got someone that's proven and has been in the industry year over year and has been sort of a face of it, it's worth considering having and leveraging that expertise and not losing money where you don't need to, right? And so I recognize that in Dan, early on when we did some deals, and you're a great resource, and I think we try to be a great resource for our customers. But again, we do all this research every day. We see it every day, and I think just even giving us a call and getting our opinion on stuff and opening the line of communication is valuable. And at first doesn't really, it's all for free, right? We're not getting paid until the deal closes, but we're doing this just to develop our business, but also to be a value add and a resource for customers or potential customers.
That's right, Mackie. And you always shoot it straight, which I always appreciate. I do want to say, and as we're getting toward the end of the podcast, I do want to say, people ask me, what is the top qualities that you need to be in senior housing? And having been in it for 30 years, you cannot walk through a facility, which I've walked through literally hundreds of facilities, without it tearing at your heartstrings to see the people that live in these facilities. I tell the people that want to get in this industry, if you're getting in it because you're calculating the numbers only, don't get in the business. This is a business that you have to have a heart and you have to have brains. You got to have a great head for business. And you can combine that and actually care for the people. It's the ones that don't seem to care for the residents that I see show up in the regulatory complaints and even get shut down. And it always bothers me when I see that, because these are human lives with families, and these are people that need assistance, whether they have money, they don't have money to provide care. The Medicaid buildings that I see, I have a heart for those, because those people need care without having the resources. So a heart and a head and having integrity. And what we try to do, we're not saying that we're not doing deals. Our job is to get a deal done. Okay, let's be frank. We want to be professional and make sure that we serve our clients, but it's always upsetting when you see someone not going to it for the wrong reason.
I think that it's not a business of passive income. This is not a self-storage facility, right? This is a very involved deal, and we want to be involved with the right buyers for these deals, and especially the ones where the need is so high, and we're okay to hop in and do that. And the way that we can do that and help people in tertiary markets is through leverage and the programs that we offer, mainly on our SBA side. We offer two programs that help folks get into it. Maybe it's an operator that has had experience and wants to buy there first, right?
We'll talk about some of these programs.
Yeah, I think that's important. So I think the biggest barrier to entry from the finance side is the down payment, right? Right now on a conventional side, they are very low levered deals. So sometimes, some cases, you're seeing people put 40% down, and that's just not realistic for the middle market buyer.
Very, very difficult.
It's just So what we're able to do is provide a 90% leverage loan, right? So they're coming in with 10% of the total deal, and we're financing that the huge lion's share of the rest of it, right? And we do that with SBA 7A, and that tops off at about $5 million in debt. But we can, as Live Oak's a little bit more flexible, where we will go over that amount, a few million over that amount if we like the deal. And then there's another product that'll be more of a real estate play and a larger, runway, which would be the 504 product, and that you can go 15 million in debt, in some cases 18 million, and we're kind of just lending on the real estate on those. So those are going to be more your 150 bed, and then the 7A is going to be your smaller facility. But that has been so popular. We've even had calls from really institutional size backed folks which aren't SBA borrowers trying to utilize that leverage, right? And so that's the most important thing. Rate, we're very competitive there, and we hope to see rates go down. But really, providing leverage, providing a lot of different uses in the loan, right? Marketing, working capital, construction, pretty much anything under the sun on the 7A side, we can fit into the loan. And we structure these loans with a good amount of interest only in certain cases to where you're not stressed, right? You don't want to go into a heavily operational, minded business and worrying about your loan, right? So we try to make it very easy. There are no performance covenants. There are no balloons. And so, really, as long as you're making that payment and doing what you shouldn't be having to think about Live Oak Bank. We're going to call you every quarter, make sure you're doing okay. We're going to come see you every year, or I'll see you when you buy it. We're going to see you every year after. But we just do that to get in front of any issues, right? We managed our borrowers through COVID, I think, exceptionally well. And, hey, look, if you've got a smaller facility and you have some attrition, which means if people move on to skilled nursing or people pass away, and that maybe it happens a little bit more 1 month than it should, we can call us and maybe we can work on something to structure around that, and we knowing that you'll get everything back and that. So yeah, we know the business. We're doing tons of these all over the country. We go see every customer, and to Dan's point, and we call it here at Live Oak Bank the eye of the tiger. And in this case, in this industry, it's that person that cares. It's the person that knows every detail of the business. And not saying you can't have help and hire administrators or a third-party management company, but we want to know that you're there and you know exactly what's happening in your facility or facilities. And so that's the type of person, that's how we can offer this leverage to. That's where we want to do business with. And again, we're doing a ton of deals. We're excited to keep growing it.
Sure. Well, let's recap just a moment some of the things that we've talked about today. And let's just, if it's okay, just to say, 10,000 people a day turning 80 in 2025.
Yep.
But that's just the front end of the 76.4 million
Correct.
baby boomers.
Correct.
So the demographics are on the side of the industry. The demographics, the people are coming. Okay. Interest rates seem to be moderating, slowly coming down.
Yeah.
Inflation, which has affected operators on their expense side, seems to be moderating or even coming down. Employment stabilizing. Payroll. I mean, are you seeing it? I think it's stabilizing.
Yeah. So like we noted earlier, so the payroll expense jumped up, and the revenue, your revenue is catching up with that, right? Little by little, right? Bed rates are increasing, right? You can't overnight increase your bed rates, right? Like it's just gradual. So I think that's catching up for sure. I mean, that's your biggest headwind for sure.
Biggest headwind is managing employment, getting the right people, and being able to manage that cost.
Yep.
We had a slide that the median property age in senior housing is what, 18 years?
18 years.
Okay, so there's a lag. There's a lag in development.
Yep.
This year is the lowest number of development starts in senior housing in like 10 years.
Yep.
So we have a clash. We have people coming through the pig and the python, people coming through. It's like a freight train headed toward 80.
Yeah.
And we have very little building.
That's correct. We've had absorption, but now we're absorbed, like I said earlier. And now it's time to get to work, time to get busy. Let's get, we got to go. We got to go, and we're here to do that.
Well, it's an exciting industry. I want to thank Mackie Hughes, a senior loan officer with Live Oak Bank, who's been here for quite some time. Live Oak Bank for hosting us here at the beautiful campus in Wilmington. And Mackie, just thank you for your time today, and thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Of course, we're so happy to have you, Dan, and you're a great resource to the folks here in the Carolinas. And we're both here ready to go, and we'll have contact information and follow-up stuff at the end of this recording. And thank you, everybody, for taking the time to listen to us.
Wonderful. Thank you.